Today on Fortnite, I got second place. I was so close.
Mom, will you get me a snack?
Mom! It's time for adult conversation. With me, your host, Brandy Ferner. Hello, Adult Conversation podcast listeners. Today's episode is my holiday gift to you. It's so validating and relatable and just funny. My guest, family friend and dad of two, Jim Bialick, stops by to give us an inside look at his quick education in stay-at-home parenthood. Jim and his wife Kelly recently swapped roles. After 6 years of staying home with the kids, Kelly became the breadwinner, and Jim traded in his high-level job in Washington, D.C. for cleaning up vomit and shuttling his girls to ballet. One day, I got a private message from Jim that said, "I have a new perspective as now the stay-at-home parent. Nobody needs this many snacks, and kids are more full of shit than politicians." I loved hearing his take on the parts of parenthood that he hadn't seen before because he was the working parent. Selfishly, it was super satisfying to hear this strong, professional dad talk about how in just a short time, he'd been brought to his knees by two small people. I asked him what other new insights he had, to which he answered, "Things that are cute get not cute very quickly." Then I asked him if he would come bare his soul on my podcast so that all of us stay-at-home parents could feel seen and validated, and thankfully, he said yes. So join us for today's episode where Jim shares about being iced out by ballet moms, the loneliness of no adult contact all day, what it feels like to be on the receiving end of your spouse's work trip pics from the beach, his existential crisis in the minivan, and much more about what happens when your clients go from being presidents to preschoolers. I want to give a shout out to my newest Patreon peep, Tiffany Gordon. Hello and thank you. If you would like to join other lovely listeners in helping make this podcast possible, you can go to patreon.com/adultconversation and throw just a few bucks my way. That's patreon.com/adultconversation. On to the show. All right, so today on the podcast, I have with us Jim Bialick. Hello, Jim.
Hello.
So you've recently become a stay-at-home dad after 6 years of being the working parent. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So your wife, Kelly, and I met at a jamboree.
I actually think you're still in her phone as Brandy Jamboree.
That's so perfect. And so our families became friends. And so Kelly and I hung out a whole bunch because our girls were the same age and they were friends and we were friends and all that great stuff. And so, of course, then we got to meet you and then we loved you. So we've been sort of family friends.
Yeah.
So I had to laugh when I got this instant message from you about your shift at being the stay-at-home parent. And I was just laughing because it's like the daily stuff that, you know, I've been doing for about almost 13 years and Kelly had been doing for 6 years. And so I love that you reached out to me because I feel like, what does that say about me that when people are falling apart or having hilarious parenting struggles that they come to me, which I like absolutely love. But yeah, I had so many questions for you. Like, so is it what you thought it would be? Is it harder? Is it easier? Like what brings you to your knees quickest? All of those things. So then I thought, why don't I bring you on here and let's really have a discussion about what the shift has been like for you. So we will get to that. But first of all, what do you think the listeners need to know about you?
So, like you said, I'm staying home now for the first time ever. I have been working in the Washington, D.C. area for about 10 years and really involved in politics and some international relations stuff. And so, you know, I was really moving minute by minute, kind of caught up in all the DC nonsense that goes on a day-to-day basis. And then also because I was doing a lot of international work, I was traveling a lot. So it's actually interesting now with my 3-year-old, I keep asking my wife saying like, I don't remember Eleanor, our 6-year-old, doing this. I mean, I just don't remember being like that. And, you know, she very calmly reminds me that I was not there for a lot of that time. So I'm learning a lot of this on the fly.
Yes.
It's a big change.
And I think, too, one of the interesting things about you is that you've had some pretty high-profile jobs. You've worked with presidents. Like, how many presidents have you met?
I met Carter, Clinton, Bush, W. Bush, and I've met Trump. Didn't meet Obama, even though I was here for his entire administration. I never met him.
I'm now retitling this episode "The World's Greatest Tragedy."
Yeah.
Out of all of that, oh my God. Okay, so with the jobs that you've had and the work that you've done, you're meeting with some pretty high-profile people, and then you switch to the opposite of that, which is funny because it's like the most important people in your world, and yet maybe not the most refined or professional. So it's probably got to be a pretty big shift for you.
Yeah, it's been different. I think when you're in the corporate world, there is this expectation that when, someone who's in charge says, go do this, that everybody will drop everything to go do that one thing. Because it's their job. It's their job to comply with that person. In politics, it's a little different because people say things all the time. They don't really end up doing it. It's just kind of they say it and it peters out. I always say that's why when you have like someone that's a long-term executive at a big company, a CEO, that becomes a congressman or congresswoman, they're always really surprised that people just don't do what they say.
Oh.
And I definitely had that that mentality going into it where, I'm kind of used to managing people. And so like, all right, well, listen, I've streamlined the morning routine. Like we're out the door a little bit faster. This is going well. And then, I already have dresses picked out, and even I picked out 2 because I thought, well, the 3-year-old, I could say, well, do you want this one or this one? And she would choose.
Right.
I was like, well, do you want, yellow dress or pink dress? And she just looks at me and goes, no. I was like, well, what do you mean? No, like no, like you get to do one of these 2 dresses. And that led to like her stamping her feet and rolling around on the ground. And it like totally just everything fell apart. Like my best laid plans fell apart within like the first 10 minutes of me doing this at home. So,
and didn't you and I refer to this as the humbling? This is part
humbling.
of the humbling
Yes.
process.
Yes. I mean, and especially in the early part, that's when you're immediately reminded of the things that you were doing that you may have put higher value on before, where you're like, I've met 4 goddamn presidents and I'm here with this kid rolling around on the ground. Like she somehow got a water bottle during it and was throwing that around. It was like, yeah,
oh my
you get
God.
humbled pretty
You're like,
quick.
Do you know who I am?
Yeah, exactly.
I am?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do the, do you know who I am? And she gives me the, who do you think you are? Pretty regularly.
Right. Yeah, well, as much as any job can have such difficult personalities, I always think about when you're parenting, especially the younger years and the toddlers, how it's unlike any job I can imagine, except for if you worked in a mental health institution or a zoo. Right. And in both of those situations, they allow you to use tranquilizers. But in this situation, they do not. So I've struggled to liken it to anything, to give a metaphor for what it's like. And I don't think until you're in it, you realize no matter how shitty your job is, that the amount of resistance that you get from a toddler is just unmatched for any job or any awful boss. That's my take on it. I'm sure there's people out there who are like, actually, my boss is an ass. My kids are better, but especially coming from where you are, where people are expected to do their job. I love within the first 15 minutes, your girls are like, yeah, we run this. Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, it's very much like the Captain Phillips scene where they're like, the pirate takes the boat and he's like, I'm the captain now. I got that very early on. I think the zoo analogy is probably the closest one because it was really jumping into it because the first 2 weeks that I was doing this was also a training period for my wife where she had to be in Florida for 2 weeks. And so I had some support from family, which was great. But then, it was really just learning a new routine. School had just started. We're learning everything.
Yeah.
And so, we had a lot of people saying, oh, come over for a play date or whatever. And I think it was very much like the zoo mentality where sometimes the kids were just so crazy. I was like, no, the exhibit is closed for today. We need to we need to take a break on this.
Exactly. All of that stuff that you do when you're a stay-at-home parent, where you are doing play dates and you go do the park and all of these things, I think from the outside, those things look like, oh, how fun. You guys get to have fun all day. But I think the outside perspective, and I'm not saying that you had this, but I think people who don't get an insight into it just think it's fun, and they don't realize like the low-level management that's always happening and the low-level gauging of, should we even do this? Have I pushed it too far? Is somebody about to get hungry? Is it going to be too hot? All of that stuff. So what you're talking about, where you're just like, yeah, exhibits closed. Those are pieces that I feel like from the outside maybe aren't so obvious that are a part of the experience.
Totally. As simple as it sounds, like something like folding laundry is one that I never really got, because it's like, I can just watch TV and fold laundry.
Yes.
But now it's like you have all these different competing interests that make it really complicated. And, both our girls are in dance classes. They both, have extracurricular activities. We have a lot of friends that they want to see. And now with Eleanor being in elementary school, we have a different schedule. The kids are on different schedules for the first time. I got to get one home to do nap so I can wake her up and give her a half hour to yell at me before we put on her ballet stuff and go pick up her sister.
Right.
And so these are just like new, and like, I'll tell you, like, part of the humbling is it's made me feel like an asshole about it, because I don't want to say that I didn't fully know that all this work was going on. I just don't think I appreciated it in the same way. Like, I definitely have always very deeply appreciated that my wife has wanted to stay home with the kids, especially because she has amazing career history and, has been a part of some really very cool and exciting things. And I think that in her new role that she has, like, she's absolutely thriving in that. And so I don't want to say like I'm valuing the work different, or that I'm the first one to discover that it's pretty just difficult to keep these unruly kids in a house clean. But part of the humbling is like, does nobody know how hard this is? And it's like, oh, wait, you were the only one who just weren't really thinking about it. So,
yeah. Well, and how could you know? That's the other thing is like, unless you're in the day-to-day of it, how could you know? And I think too, it's different when you come in and you do a day, like as any parent just comes in and is like, oh, I got the kids for a couple days while my wife's gone or my husband's gone or whatever. But why I wanted to talk to you is because it becomes a whole different ballgame when, for the unforeseeable future, you're it.
Yeah.
Because anybody can parent through, okay, I got 24 more hours and then I'm back to my life. That doesn't include doing all of this.
Yes.
And so even with you, because I know you're in the process of switching careers, and like, you still have at the end of this, there's still probably an out for you. And so the one piece of this that you don't have, that a stay-at-home parent and usually the mom has, is endlessness.
Okay, an opportunity for parole.
Exactly. Like, any time that you're having a low moment, you probably don't have to tell yourself, well, I only have 17 more years of this. Or, you know what I mean? Like my husband and I were talking the other day about just when there's something going on in your life, whether it's the kid waking up or they won't eat, or you go to a party and you have to follow them or whatever the thing is that feels like an infringement on your freedom. Most of the time, it's something that you have to swallow for like 5 to 10 more years.
Yeah.
So this feeling of there's probably going to be a relief for you. So maybe some of the things feel like, well, I can get through it for X amount of weeks or months or whatever. But Jim, I just want you to really tap into, next time you're having the hardest time, I want you to tap into, if you were like, only 15 more years. And then on top of that, I just want to add the extra layer that then your period would maybe start. So those are just like two elements of the stay-at-home momhood that I feel like really go unlooked. Okay.
That's absolutely true. And setting those milestones for sanity's sake has been a big part of this for me.
Yeah.
So in addition to all the stuff that's been changing, we're also in the process of selling our house. Right.
Because that's how life works. Because everything huge has to happen at once. Yeah.
Always. And so keeping the house show ready at the drop of a hat, where we get, this text message come through, can someone come and look at the house right, in the next hour? It's like, all right, kids, dogs, get in the car. Or there was a couple of days where there were showings during the ballet classes. So like literally like the dogs and whatever daughter was not dancing, like we were in the minivan,
Right, yes.
But at the same time, like the milestone on that had been, well, this will be a lot easier when I don't have to keep the house in such crazy condition. So we got to a point where we had 2 days where we didn't have any showings, and it was just like actually spending time with the kids. I didn't have to like have the dogs with me constantly, which I love them, but they've got about 12 brain cells between them. So it's kind of hard to take them places. And I really honestly was thinking like, I could really imagine myself being good at this and really imagine myself enjoying this.
Yeah, without having to do the whole house thing.
Totally. But then that gave me like pretty significant pause because I was implying that I wasn't enjoying it, and this was on one of the days where I wasn't dealing with the house crap. I was actually just being with the girls. And so that was a point where I think I had to stop thinking about it on the milestone, it'll get better when, because that means you're just like plowing through it. And when your heart's not in it, it's harder.
Yeah. I remember when you messaged me, I think when we were talking and I asked you how it was going, you were like, I can see myself liking this. And I laughed so hard because the lived version and the imagined version of parenthood, I just love this idea of people saying like, oh, how's motherhood or how's fatherhood? And going like, I can see myself enjoying it. It would be such an amazing, but also like honest response. But then like what you're saying is this idea that once you get through this move, then maybe you'll be able to enjoy it. But in my head, I'm already thinking ahead and know like, well, but then you're in cold and flu season. So then what will happen is then your kids will be homesick or you'll be dealing with this. And then you'll go, okay, once it's spring and summer again, and then you'll go, oh, it's summer. They're home the whole summer. Once it's not summer, and then exactly what you're saying, then you find yourself doing like what you're talking about, this I will enjoy it when. And I feel like the reality is I will enjoy it when they aren't children anymore. Yeah. I will enjoy the memories of this. It's so fucked up.
Well, and it also, when you talk to people that don't understand it, like I keep in touch with people that I worked with in the past, and they're like, how was your day yesterday? And the things that you blurt out, they just make no sense. There's no context for it. So it's like, oh, what'd you do yesterday? And it's like, well, I kind of had a little bit of a panic because my 3-year-old fell asleep in the car and I needed to pee and I didn't want to wake her up. And like, I didn't know what I was going to do for 45 minutes. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like,
yes. And you can probably see from that experience. So one of the things that I noticed about becoming a stay-at-home parent was that when I would go into group settings and we'd all be chatting about, life or what our week was like, all of a sudden the things that I'm talking about are like you're saying, like they're crazy. Nobody can relate to it except the other stay-at-home parents. If you have a professional job, those stresses and those experiences are different than literally listing off every time you got woken up that last night. That I remember in the beginning specifically was like we would get together, and if there was another mom, it would be like, well, she was up at 3:15, but then I got her back down, and then she was up at 4:30. And now I look at it because I'm so far out of that, and I'm like, how did somebody not slap us? Like, you guys, this is the most boring shit, but it was our world,
Totally. It was a new experience. I mean, everything. The one thing I completely didn't expect is how much the being at home parenting is kind of like being in high school. It's really, really cliquey. And I never really expected that. Even for the moms and the dads, there's like, oh, these are the dads that are in the bike group. These are the beer dads. These are the coach baseball dads. And I experienced the same thing with the moms. And, I talked about the girls being in the dance class, and one of the dance classes, I'm the only dad that's ever there. And, there will be no talking to me. I mean, they've got their own group and their, insular thing.
I can't believe how much they've put you on ice.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like out here, if a dad shows up, A, he gets sort of special treatment, but B, I don't know about the icing. Do you think that's an area thing, or do you think that's probably how it is in most places?
I don't know. That could be regional. Maybe it is. I think what was interesting is like, and I've been really involved in the girls doing their dance classes because they love it. And
okay, just say it, Jim. Just do your shout out about your resume, please.
So I've done both daddy-daughter dances, which is like a choreographed thing. And then I was Gaston when the pageant was the Beauty and the Beast.
Amazing.
So like, I feel like going into the dance class, I should have at least a little credibility,
Can you remind them that you were Gaston? Like, do they know? Do they know that you were that?
I think one of them does, because I recognize the daughter. So one of them does. But the example was, so we have the little like Amazon tablets for the girls. And,
right.
Eleanor looks at it while we're waiting for Amelia's dance class. And one of the other moms, her son was having like a full blown meltdown because they had either his had run out of battery or they had forgotten it. And so I had the other one in my bag and I was like, oh, hey, like, does he want to use this one? I mean, it's just sitting in my bag.
Yes.
Yeah. Man, they looked at me like I had just gone on like a swearing tirade. It was just like stunned silence. And then they turned around and started talking to each other again. It's like, whoa, this is insane. And then that gets into like the
How dare they?
I know, the humbling and like the weird doubt that you start to feel, in like a totally different environment. And I was like, oh my gosh, do I not understand social cues? Have I been doing human interaction poorly all this time?
Right.
That was a weird experience for sure.
Totally. As I'm hearing you say this, I'm thinking these relationships in these little worlds that we have, we put in a lot of time and effort, as you know, through Kelly, because I know she does the same thing with her friendships. And maybe it's a personality thing because I'm always looking to help and gather in the weary, and the overwhelmed.
Sure.
So if I'm at dance and there's a mom that's losing it, like I have a soft spot for her and I maybe wouldn't go out of my way, or I definitely wouldn't ice somebody who clearly was looking for adult conversation or interaction clearly. But I wonder if in their mind, they're like, oh, no, we've been working on this relationship for about 10 years now or 6 years or whatever the thing is.
Right. Yeah.
And like, you don't just get to walk in here and have all the benefits of this tightness without doing the work. But that's so messed up because how do you ever find your people in this? But you said you have found dads. Like, wasn't there a dad that wanted to do a dad play date where you guys were like fixing stuff together?
Yeah. No, there were a couple.
Sweet.
It's amazing. Like, I'm not like the handiest person by any means. So, he comes over. He's like, if you're going to a job interview, like I can watch Amelia or pick her up and just take her home for a little while. And then also like, I noticed the sink was leaking. Like, I'll just go run and grab some parts and we can just like fix that too. It's like, oh man, this is great.
I love that.
We'll keep you around.
This is so gender stereotypes, and I totally love it. If I had said like, well, do you guys do a dad play date and you like fix things? Everybody would be like, that's a stereotype. How dare you? But the reality is that exists.
Listen, I'm happy to live this stereotype. I wish I had a useful husband. That would be fantastic.
Well, so what do you think out of all of it, and you've touched on some of it, what do you think surprised you the most about becoming the stay-at-home parent?
I think it's a combination of how hard it is to keep like a schedule is one thing. When it's like, oh, I just have to drop the kids off to school and pick up. Any one little change to that really throws off the day.
Right.
And I never really understood that. And these kids are really flexible. They're dealing with a lot of change right now. But at the same time, like, we have to skip this, or, we're not going to be able to do it because we have a showing or something like that. Those changes where it's like, oh yeah, can you just go do this at, 2:30? And it's like, God, that's like right before I have to pick up Eleanor at school. And that kicks off a whole, all right, I got to figure out how to do this. It's one thing when you're working in there, you have a lot of meetings, so you can move those around. Like, these are fixed timelines, like that you can't change things. You can't change when kindergarten ends.
Yes, I call them hard stops. Like whereas in business, I feel like there's soft stops because you could say to somebody, hey, let's push that meeting back 15 minutes. But if you don't show up at kindergarten, you get charged and you get a phone call. So you have to adhere to that schedule like a dog being trained. Like, they have a clicker and they will click and shock you if you're not there on time. And that's a really different way to live. Have you felt that, like with all the drop-offs and pickups that you're constantly trying to work around? Like, do you feel more pressure or stressed or panicked to make sure that you make those?
It's definitely a source of anxiety. It definitely is.
Yeah. Okay. Do you set alarms on your phone? How do you remember to do that?
Yeah, I was at first. And now I think that it's been beaten into me enough where like, I just know when it's time to go, and it's like the machine turns on.
Yes.
The other thing that has been, I think, probably most surprising, and this is maybe a little more nuanced, but interacting with other people while they're parenting their own kids. So, we have our own set of rules. For example, like the girls are not allowed to play with guns, toy guns. That's something that I'm very strict about that because I don't want them to think they're toys.
Right.
Especially, we live in the South. It's a different mentality here. There are a lot more guns around. There's a lot more military families, a lot more law enforcement families. Like, the idea that someone has a gun in their house, it's a probably, not a maybe. And I've been really strict about that to the point where they've missed out on playing some games for that reason. So that's my like one one of my
you're gonna
many
die on that hill.
eccentricities. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But then when we're at a park or in a public place where you see other people parenting and they come out hard on things that you just never even thought of. So like we were at a park and there was a little boy that was, like 4 maybe. And he walked up to like another mom that was in there and was just talking to her. I just kind of like struck up a conversation and his mom came over and grabbed him and pulled him back and said, "What have I told you? You never talk to a woman unless they talk to you first." And I was like,
wow.
Whoa.
You do live in the South. Yeah.
Yeah. and I was like, holy, is that? And then like you start to rehash all the things that you're prioritizing. I was like, wait, is that the thing that I'm, not, is this why, like, when I was at the dance studio, everybody iced me? Because, like, I'm not supposed to talk to women? I was, like, really confused by that. And so I've never heard that before. It makes you kind of take account of the things that you push as your top priorities with your kids. And then when you see it, when other people have differing priorities, it's just a different social experiment, I guess.
Well, it's so interesting because it's like you were talking about this high school mentality and like wondering with the ballet moms, do I not know social cues? It's almost like it's not like being gaslit. That's not the right thing. But it's like it's like you're having to question everything you've known. I thought I knew social cues and then maybe I don't. And then wait, this person's teaching their kid this and I hadn't even thought about it. Like how have I been living all along? But I feel like what you're seeing is not the norm or not something like that you should necessarily strive towards, but I can imagine how it's making you think, wait a minute, but should I be doing these things? Like I just love this whole personality check that you're getting that you have to like ask yourself.
There are all these weird new sources of anxiety. And I have a low level anxiety all the time, but I don't consider myself someone with debilitating anxiety where I can't do stuff. But then the other thing is in those times between dropping kids off at stuff and picking them up from stuff, you are alone a lot. And so that's something that I'm not used to at all. Because I'm always at work. I've always had like a bunch of people around me. And there are a bunch of people that are talking to me, need to talk to me, want to talk to me, kind of thing like that.
Right.
And as you know, my wife is very outgoing.
Yes. She's the best, by the way.
Yeah, yes. I mean, like to the point where she got a job because she started talking to someone in the locker room at the gym. And I was thinking like the locker room at the gym is where you keep your eyes down and your mouth quiet. Like, like this, I don't understand. Like this is a totally different lifestyle. But,
right.
But I would say that 90% of our friends are people that we've met because Kelly has befriended a mom or someone else, through one of her social groups that she's in. And then, they become part of our family friend group, our family social network. Most people that I know that are like friends that I met before Kelly, these are like friends from high school and college. The people that I know now, it's been from work. And also because, like you said, some of the jobs I've had, they've had a bigger profile. Either people want to talk, like come up to me because they want something, or because, they kind of have to interact with me because that's their job.
Yeah.
And so that's when that gives you that extra gut check, because when I'm, when I was experiencing these new, like, it sounds so weird because it's like I have never understood human interaction before, but I'm just like,
right.
I guess I'm doing it.
That's what I'm laughing about.
Yeah. It's like...
and not because you don't, but because you're being forced to like rethink the way that I'm social. Like, am I likable? Like,
yeah. Like, am I like really weird? Like, yeah.
Do people only talk to me because they had to at work? Like, I'm like a nice person, right?
Totally. And so there I am driving around in the car, like again, with the 3-year-old asleep in the back. I can't stop somewhere to go to the bathroom to wake her up because she's going to be yelling at me until we have to pick up the 6-year-old. And I'm like having like this existential crisis in the minivan. And I was like, Jesus, like, wow, the tables have really turned here. It's
so fast. It's so fast how the existential crisis in the minivan happens. There's no like sliding into this easy because we've all been there, and the kinds of things that it makes you question. I think your point about how you have a lot of time alone and all of these anxieties that get thrown in there. I feel like that is the essence of, I would say, motherhood, but in this case, to open it up to the stay-at-home parent, the person who is the main caretaker, because all of a sudden you've got time to worry about crap. Stuff is so different than how you've ever lived your life. Like this personality stuff that you're questioning, when we become stay-at-home parents, it's so fast. And then everything you knew about the world just gets like flipped upside down, and your value, which maybe you're experiencing too, with wondering like, well, so do people only talk to me when they need something or whatever? What is this? The moms won't talk to me. Like this idea of value and like what who you really are on this planet. That happens when we become parents, but I think to a deeper extent, it happens when you become the person who is the isolated stay-at-home parent. That's just part of that bag, that is just, it's just inherent in it. So it's interesting that even a couple months in, like you are already crying in your minivan on the side of the road, like maybe not that far, but like that is so friggin' real, dude.
Yeah. It really highlights to me the importance of having a support network, whether it's formal or informal, or even just like an outlet.
Yes.
Because we have been so lucky with the friends that we have, moms, dads, that have reached out, like they're being proactive because I think they know that I am not going to do that right away. That's been really, really positive. And even just having that extra support, checking in kind of thing like that, it's great for two reasons. One is because it's again, like you're not just necessarily alone with your thoughts all the time. But the other is my wife is starting a brand new job in a very, serious role. And like, I know that she is missing being at home just to be around the kids, but I also know that she really loves her job and is thriving in that job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be bombarding her with text messages like kid shit on the couch again kind of thing. And so I've been trying to be as respectful of that as possible. There are certain things where I just like fundamentally don't know.
Right.
But I mean, like what you guys do, with the podcast, even just having a conversation where people know that they're not fully just on their own or that they're not insane.
Exactly.
If someone can remind you that you're not fully insane, just like even if you could just set an alarm on your phone that just says, just a reminder, like you're a human on this earth, you're not insane. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. Yes, totally. And now that the tables are turned, I remember you saying when we talked before that when Kelly was at a training, she had sent you a picture. They did a day where they did training all day and then they went to the beach.
Yeah.
And you were laughing at like, oh God, that hurt. And, thinking back to maybe the times that you'd sent her pictures when you were in Cuba or something, or weren't you in Germany? Like, I don't know why I know this, but I feel like you were at Germany for some awesome thing or something. So what does that feel like to be on the other end of watching somebody be alive in the world in this whole other way, and then you're at home cleaning out piss and goldfish crackers from a car seat?
Yeah. Oh, it's always the wet goldfish. It's so gross.
So gross.
I think that it's another thing that I've had to check myself on because my gut reaction, like my visceral reaction, is just to be resentful. And that's not okay. I mean, like, she's just having a good time. She's blowing off steam. I mean, there have been pictures that I've sent her from places where, I'm mad at myself for having sent those pictures now.
But it's hard. I mean, I would imagine on that side, it's like you want to share, and especially if you don't know, like that's the thing is you were in a position where you didn't know yet what that felt like. So now when you go back to work, if the tables were to ever change, like maybe you would know, and maybe you would pick a different picture to send that didn't rub salt in the wound, so like
yeah.
I'm not trying to give you an out, but like also you didn't know what it felt like to be that isolated person who's like only 16 more years. And now you do. So know better, do better, right?
Yes, exactly. I think that there's like the mentality is like, hey, sharing my good time. And when you're, in the gulag, right. it's hard to do that.
Right. Sharing my good time that you will not see for the next decade.
Yeah. Right? Yes. One day you too could have this experience, but until then.
So are you in a spot yet where you have a good rhythm on things, or do you still feel like you're tweaking things, or once the move happens, then you feel like you'll get in a better rhythm? Like, how are you doing? What are your 2 months in?
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah. The streamlining of the morning routine has gone very well. The more practical things, I think we have a pretty good hold on. I still dread Monday and Tuesday because of the complexities of like their dance classes and stuff like that. But I'm pretty comfortable and confident with being able to, get people in and out the door. The thing that we haven't been doing, quite honestly, is as many social events as Kelly would have done. So I feel bad because it's like, these girls are just so social and I don't want to isolate them by any means. So
do you find yourself comparing what you're doing to how Kelly did it? And do you find yourself judging yourself? Or because the thing here too is that the hardship, I would imagine, in your role is you're coming in with a whole framework that somebody has set for you. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you start out as the stay-at-home parent, you get to set the framework. So your framework has sort of been set to this, to how Kelly did it and some of the socialization and all of that. So do you feel like you're coming in and trying to keep those things up? Or do you feel like you can come in and be you and say like, well, I don't necessarily know that I want to be out doing that much aside from the house stuff. Like, do you find yourself trying to fill her shoes in?
Yeah.
And if so, is that uncomfortable? Are there times when you're like, but that's not how I'm comfortable. So even though she would have done it this way, like if I'm going to be the stay-at-home parent, I can't do it that way because that is not congruent with my personality.
It's a kind of two-part answer to that would be, I keep thinking that this isn't me. But I mean, it is. I mean, it fundamentally is me.
Wow.
And like,
Wow.
so it's hard. It's not that I'm trying to necessarily compare myself to her, because I feel like I'm comparing what she did just something that's something else, something that's just really foreign to me. The other part of that is, again, she was gone for the training for the 2 weeks. And then that's when I was totally redoing the house. So she actually flew back in. And when she came into the house, like she had never been in it like it was. So like she was coming into a different house. And so that's why I say it's a little bit different, because that was kind of a reset point where I would be comparing myself to her probably constantly if nothing had changed beside the facts that I was just staying home. But because I had done this thing, it was like a reset. So now it's like, well, it's not your show, it's my show. And this is what I have to do to keep the house, in a certain way. And
got it.
But at the same time, I constantly think about how much fun the girls have always had. And it just sucks because I'm like, no, you can't do that. Put that down. I feel like just have these like crazy austerity measures in place. It's the circumstances of the situation. And that's when I do compare myself, I think, a lot more, which is like, I think she was just generally more fun than me. I think she generally is more fun than me, just as a baseline. But I think that on all things, but that's, I think, where I compare it most directly.
Well, and it's interesting. I think that exists in every relationship and in every parenting relationship where there is one parent that's more fun than the other one in specific ways, right?
Yeah.
I definitely, my husband is the more fun one when it comes to like sitting down and making Barbies talk and then giving them crazy names and having crazy scenarios and all of that kind of stuff. Like he's that guy. So, but it's like a little bit, I don't know. It's like confronting a little bit to think about, why am I not like that? Or why can't I bring that to the kids? So I don't know that I've ever met a couple where both parents are the fun parents or both parents are the less fun parent. I think that there's always a decent balance.
Totally. It would have to be because, Kelly and I both have, I think, pretty type A personalities, which leads to conflict, obviously, because we both have an idea of the way things should be done.
Sure.
I imagine if you had two people that were just like so zany all the time, that could be pretty extreme in a different, hopefully positive way, but maybe a negative way as well.
Exactly. So now that you've got like your morning routine sort of streamlined, where I was going with that was, do you have any dad hacks for us? Like, is there anything that you've learned and that you've put in place that's like the Jim Bialick trademark certain thing that we can all learn something from you? Is there anything that you do that you're like, this is pretty genius?
I don't think it's that particularly genius as much as like, I make it so the kids have to put their shoes on before they go downstairs for breakfast. Because I find that I spent 15 minutes that we didn't have every day on just getting people's shoes on. I was like, why? Why?
Shoes. How do shoes... How like before you have kids, you don't realize that shoes can undo an entire family.
Totally.
Like every day, shoes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, and I think this is what maybe had kicked off the first message I sent to you, was there's no way they need this many snacks. They just constantly want snacks. Well, I'm hungry. It's like, you just ate like a pound of bacon. How are you still hungry?
Well, so with the shoes, okay, so the hack on that is that you make them put the shoes on before they even come downstairs
for breakfast,
so that right before you're leaving, you're not dealing with shoes. And do you find that when you have them do it earlier, there's less bullshit about it?
Yeah, they don't grouse about it because they know they won't be able to get downstairs unless they have their shoes on.
How do you patrol this? Are you at the bottom like, you will not get past me if you don't have shoes on? I'm wondering why they're not like, no,
Well, there's a there's a gate, and then
see, that's what I was wondering.
And then also they know that if we're in a hurry, they can't watch a show like while they're eating breakfast, and so it's like, well, if you want to watch a show, we have to be ready, don't we? And they're like, yeah. So
got it.
They'll be quick to brush their teeth.
That's what I was sussing out.
Yeah.
That is what I was sussing out, is like, where is the incentive for them? Because putting shoes on, even though it makes sense for you, in my mind, I'm like, why would they say yes to that? Yeah. And so then as I'm going deeper, I'm realizing, oh, yes, there is TV. There is some sort of entertainment that they are gaining. They're like that and everything clicks now. Yes.
But that's also, I would say, one of the things that I had to get past really early on was that when, Amelia's like, I'm not wearing this dress, or my socks can't match, or, just whatever the issue of the day is, or that when the first thing I hear from her is like, she's got a problem with something. She is like a walking Twitter, basically a cute picture every once in a while, and then just like complaining. And so the thing that I had to get past really early was they're not intentionally doing this to like troll me. Because there was like
are they though? How do you? What's the evidence you have?
I guess that's true. I just my thought was like I was getting like resentful like first thing in the morning, where I was like, no, like fuck you, kid, put your shoes on, And then I was like, wait, okay, let's everybody calm down. I don't know if that's just the stage that she's in or...
Thank you for validating the experience, Jim. This is what it is. The minute you open your eyes, you're like at the end of your rope and you're like, I can't be at the end of my rope. Like I've been awake for literally 1 minute. This is not going to go good. Reframe, attitude adjustment, like all of that.
When I wake up, the first thing I think about is when I could potentially sneak in a nap.
Yes.
It's like literally the first thing I think, and I never do it, but it's the first thing I think about. I was like, well, all right, I got this thing. Well, maybe if she goes to lunch bunch, that'll buy me an hour. And you're just so I can fucking lay down. And exactly. I just woke up. I like went to bed early. Like I just woke up.
Right. That's like me. Every morning I wake up and I'm laying there. I'm like, how can I get back here? I'm not even out of it yet, but how do I get back here? And then the whole day feels like an effort to get back to bed.
Totally.
What has been the most humbling for you? Do you think? Is there one moment that you can remember that was the most humbling moment?
Yeah. The most humbling was, I kind of tie everything back to these first 2 weeks because this was like the real trial by fire. So it was the second week. My mom had come in to help get the house in order and she had just left. And so we're like, okay, like here's our new baseline. The kids are going to go to bed soon. They're being so sweet. And they were watching, they're playing a game together, on the couch. It's like, oh, this is, look at them. Look at this little family we have, kind of thing like that. So then Kelly calls me, and I think it was a Friday. It wasn't a Friday because Kelly calls me, and she and her like team, they're basically in these like the long stay hotels, where it's like kind of like a little kitchenette thing. So they're like partying in the kitchen, and she's like FaceTiming. They're all drinking wine and having a good time. And then Eleanor walks around the corner and goes, "Dad, Amelia pooped all over the couch." And I was just like, oh. Like, I was like, I like looked at Kelly and she's like, it's so loud in the room. And like, I can see all these people like dancing behind her. And like, somehow just by looking at her in the FaceTime, I was like, I'm going to have to call you back. And she's like, okay. She goes, I'm not going to call you. You call me because I don't want to interrupt whatever just happened. And I was like, okay. And so then I went out there and oh boy, did she. She I think she had and just didn't really notice it and then like rolled around on the couch a bit.
Oh my
God.
God,
it was just everywhere.
Oh my God. She was like the human Roomba.
Yes, exactly like that. Yeah. She fully Roomba'd the couch. And so I'm like, well, I have to clean this up. This is going to stain. Like I have to like get this up. But at the same time, I can't let shitty kid walk around the house and touch other stuff. So it was just like, oh my God. So,
yeah. Was that one of the first times where something massive like that happened with one of the kids and it was all on you? You are the end of the line here. You have to make it work.
Yeah. The humbling time is when you are, I've tried not to do this, but in these times where and she didn't intentionally poop on the couch, but like at the same time.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. But in that time, I was like thinking like she did this to me, and then you get into like I have 2 degrees, and I am here like picking up shit off this
Yes.
couch, And so, yeah, that I think was like I think the humbling is definitely a gaslighting activity because it just is a constant, like a little bit, something's off. And then you eventually just are like, what do you do? I don't know. I drive around, I guess, like you kind of, you get reduced, I think a lot of it.
Yes, a lot. Yeah. And then you start building, like everything gets sort of taken away from you. So then as things get given back to you, the littlest thing, like a stranger smiled at me today, you feel like you won the lottery. Like what it takes to make you happy once you've been through the humbling is so little. It's so little. In your bed, quiet, things like this that are attainable for everyone else on the planet. But if you have small kids, like not attainable.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of the downsides and one of the benefits of it is that no longer do you need fancy dinners and nights out and all of these things. You just need the most basic human rights.
Basic human rights. Absolutely. I mean, that was the question I was going to kind of ask you in response to that and this is something that I've been trying to reflect on myself. And I don't know that I have fully actualized this so that I know the answer, but post-humbling, or I mean, I guess you never really are post-humbling, but
right.
As you are progressively humbled, do you think that you're a better person for it?
Oh, hell yes. I mean, it's funny because it's like on two different angles. Like on one hand, I'm a shell of a person. Like I don't have the same interests because I haven't had time to do those things. Like so much is stripped away from you that you feel like you're not as whole, but then in a sense, you're even more whole because you've been humbled. And for me personally, without all of this, without the humbling, the intense humbling that continues to happen, I wouldn't be who I am today. So yeah, I definitely, I mean, I feel like as cliche as it is, it's all worth it, but damn, that's the thing is I don't question if it's worth it or not. I question how do we get through the humbling? Mm-hmm. That is my MO in all of my work and what I do is that part that you were talking about, just knowing like I'm not insane. The alert goes off. Oh, yep. Remember, you're not insane today. So I feel like it definitely, for me, it gives me compassion for people in so many different situations. So like the humbling on having all the things stripped from you in parenthood, for me is similar to having things stripped from you in terms of like financial hardship or health hardship, which I have a personal tie to, but all of those things, it's like a humbling in one area translates to all the areas because you can see somebody who is so low for a totally different reason and been like, oh my God, I've been there.
Absolutely.
Can I make you soup?
Absolutely.
So yeah, do you feel that way? Do you feel like you're becoming through some lashings, you're becoming a better version of yourself from this?
Yeah, I do. I'm much more confident that I am a better version of myself now than I think I was at the beginning. Like you said, in the past, having worked in pretty high profile jobs and then having a job where the funding didn't get renewed and all of a sudden that went away. There's nothing like being essentially laid off to make you feel like you are not valued. At all.
Oh, right.
There were a lot of competing things, but without the money, there's no money for people to work there, And so my first instinct was, all right, well, fuck these guys. Like I'll go do this for somebody else. There will be another high profile job like that. And, I applied and for some, bigger places and have interviewed with them and that sort of thing. But then also now, especially after like the first month of doing this, I was like, some of these jobs would be very public, but they sound awful, or I don't really care about this. And so I was like, well, what do I really care about? And obviously I care about the safety and security of my family and that sort of thing. But then, what are the issues that I worked on before family when I was dispassion driven and not necessarily, financially driven? And one of the things I've worked on for a very long time is, newborn and early childhood issues, like on the policy level. And so I was thinking, well, listen, if that's what I really have demonstrated, I mean, my career has been pretty defined by that in a lot of ways. Maybe stop thinking about what your business card is going to say, like stop being like an American Psycho where you're comparing business cards to everybody and start thinking about what you could actually be happy, because it's going to be a lot harder when you are going to work and you're going to come home and you're still going to have to do this because your wife is working too. And so that's been a big mental shift for me. And quite honestly, it's actually worked out pretty well. I have several interviews with some really interesting nonprofits that are working in that space. And it's something where it's going to be a lot of work, and the work can be really depressing at times. But at the same time, I know that it's meaningful. And if I am going to be away from the kids and going to have to pay someone else to do something that I know I can do, then it better be worth it.
Oh, yes.
So I think that's probably the biggest benefit of the humbling. It's it really gets beat into you, but it's a re-education for sure.
Yes. And those like reprioritizations of things, we keep refining ourselves. And so the humbling is just, it's not a fine, great, it's like, it's not fine sandpaper. It's real coarse. And so then you really realize what is important to me. Who am I? After you get ground down a little bit. So, but one of the things that I'm really kind of impressed by with you is the way that you talk about the moments that you feel the resentment, which I think every listener can totally relate to. But then you have this way where you're like, okay, I don't want to be in this resentment space. How do I switch my attitude on this or how I'm looking at it, sort of thing. So do you think that your desire to not get stuck in the resentment place comes from being possibly on the receiving side of it?
Yeah.
You're learning things about what Kelly's life had been like and her day-to-day stuff. And she's probably learning things about what your day-to-day and the stresses of being the breadwinner or, having a career or whatnot. She's probably learning about those stresses. So it's like you both come back like, hey, I remember what it felt like to be on this end. So I'm now going to do something different. Do you feel like that's your response to the resentment piece because you know what that feels like?
I haven't thought about it that way.
I'm just impressed by it. Instead of you just being like, dude, I'm pissed. Instead, you're like, oh, I'm resentful, but I know that that's not a good space to be in. And maybe that's just your personality that like, how do you know that you should not stay in that?
I think maybe more so now I could say that's probably why, because I've spent some time thinking about it and not just stewing in it, But I would say that initially it was a purely selfish reason. And that was twofold. One is I can't feel like this. Like it hurts to feel like this. And it hurts so much just to get through the day anyway right now. Like I'm physically and mentally in anguish. Plus I'm still dealing with the job stuff and first time like not being able to provide. And like, I don't care that Kelly works, or I don't care if Kelly makes more money than me forever. I hope she makes way more money than me because then we have more money. But like,
right, yes.
Yeah, like it's not that I care about. But at that time, I was like, I was feeling very, very low. I feel much better than I do then, but I was feeling very, very low.
Yeah.
The other thing was this more selfish kind of sense of self. And it was not the sense of self in that like, this is who I am, but rather like, this is how I'm perceived. And I didn't want to be perceived by the kids as being just a dick all the time. And, like my dad's a great guy and we have a really good relationship. He's changed quite a bit since when I was a kid. And so like, I don't want to be like, yeah, dad was always barking at us or like really gruff or, had a quick temper.
Yeah.
Inside, I catch fire very quickly. But how that manifests or how I say that to the kids, I understand from personal experience why that's really important. And so like, I had to check myself because like, even if I am that way, I don't want to seem that way to them.
Exactly.
I don't know. That feels kind of selfish, but that's hard.
No, actually, I think that that's not selfish. I think that that's actually looking out for your kids because the easier choice in my mind is to explode and say the thing that you want to say versus the thing that it takes you a minute to get to a better place for your kids. Because my experience of motherhood has been the thing that I want to say and the thing that I do say many times are different. Because the first thing I want to say is, why the fuck would you be doing cartwheels on the couch when you have a glass of milk next to it? That's what I want to say. Like, why on earth would you think that was going to end well? But I don't say that.
Yeah.
Because same as you, like, I don't want my kids to be like, my mom's such an asshole, even though deep down inside, maybe I am. That's my stuff. That's not their stuff. So it's like taking that moment, like you're talking about, taking that moment of thinking like, how do I feel? And I also can get pretty impatient and pretty hot pretty quick. And then thinking about it, they're not trying to do this. This is developmentally appropriate. And then coming up with a response that is softer, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that that's selfish, because I can tell you 12 years of that is it's a lot of work, and it's not necessarily for me, even though maybe at the end of the day I'm concerned with how I'm portrayed in their memories, but it's really about them, because I don't want to hurt them. So I don't know. I'll tell you it's not selfish so that I can tell myself it's not selfish. Maybe I'm really saying this to myself, but
I'd be really mad if someone else did that to them. You know, if they had a teacher that was as abrupt as I feel sometimes, I would be like, this is not an appropriate place for my child to be. And so the idea that if their home is like that, then, you know, that's a bigger problem.
Exactly. Well, so what is one of the things that you'll do differently when you go back to work? Like, now that you've had this experience and you see the inside, is there anything that you'll do differently or that you'll change when you return to being a working parent?
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about this a lot, because a lot of the interviewing questions that I get are, you know, have you ever managed people? And like, what's your management style?
I'm just laughing because I'm thinking like you're managing two small people. Like, oh yeah, you want to hear the hardest people I've ever managed.
Yeah. Sorry. I know. But I mean, it's like, yeah, I manage these four tiny mammals because it's two stupid dogs, but like that like don't know our social norms, you know, like it's
exactly,
it's like having Martians, you know,
and that take longer than any other animal. You know, you look at the giraffe that's walking in like 2 hours or something, and you're like, why are we like this? Why do we have to be like this?
Our oldest dog is named Darwin, and he would never survive in the wild, you know? So like
the irony.
The great irony. Yeah. But so, and what I will do differently, the question of management, because I've always been like really direct, you know, I try to keep things light, you know, at work. I try to keep things enjoyable. I like to connect with people. I like to understand what their strengths are so that they can be most effective, and do whatever I can to help them be effective in their job. But it really stopped at the job. And like, I don't think I need to pry into everybody's personal life, but like you said, when you see lows, even if they aren't the lows that you yourself have experienced, you know what it looks like to dip like that. And so being more responsive to that, I think, is important. And part of that may be not just like, hey, I understand what you're going through, I can cover for you on whatever. That's actually probably worse for them, because what you really need to be pushing for is a more structural or institutional change to support them, because you don't want to be a crutch to them. You want them to be empowered to be really good at their job, but at the same time that like, if they need a break for something, like, understand that that's necessary. Granted, you know, there are times when things get out of control and you make a new plan for that. But when I was working at the last corporate company that I worked for, when Amelia was born, I was like, hey, I have a bunch of time off. I'm going to take a couple weeks off, you know, to help Kelly with the new baby. And they just told me no. I think that paid parental leave is very important, among many other things that we could be doing a lot better. But in that moment, I talked to some other people and they were saying, all right, listen, just don't take the time off, but like, we'll cover X, Y, and Z for you. And that was really helpful. And I was like, wow, it's like great to have friends like this at a time. But at the same time, like, that's not the problem. The problem is the company the policy is bad.
Exactly.
And so that's what I would say that I would do differently is I want to understand more of the person. They're not just like wards of the company. Like, I want to understand the person behind it, so I understand what their needs are, so that I could better shape like a workplace that would make us be more effective. Because ultimately, that's your job, is to make things effective, efficient. So I would say that this probably has really rounded out my thinking in a way that I probably wouldn't even have thought about in the past.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I wonder if you'll I mean, who knows what next venture you'll be on, but I wonder if somehow it rounds itself out to some of this more systemic stuff that has to do with paid parental leave, or I wonder, you know, with the whole parenting experience, I wonder if that's what, you know, it would be awesome for you to have this insight and to be working in that space where you really understand it. I bet you could do some pretty amazing things in there.
It'd be great. I mean, these are hard issues, and I like big chat. See, this is the other thing, and I would say, and another thing, I have always taken on jobs because I would say that I like big systemic problems. Like, I like someone to say you can't do this, and then to just do it. We did that really in a big way around some maternal and child health issues. You know, we did things around patient safety issues, things that now are impacting every kid born in the country. Like, these are big structural changes, and they said we couldn't do it. So I wanted to do it. Now, that said, that's always what I've said about myself, but now I always question whether that's actually true, because like, this job, meaning staying at home, is really, really fucking hard. And I don't want to do it a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But I know that I have to. And so it's like, oh yeah, you like big challenges? Well, here's a big challenge. And like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm not, sometimes I'm not like rising up to that. So it's like, was that just something that I've always said about myself? Or is that something that I actually practice what I preach, kind of thing? And I think that's another big part of this is that you can say whatever you want, especially out here in the DC area. People just talk constantly for the sake of talking. But like, to actually mean what you say, there is nothing like the rigidity of need that kids have to make it so that you have to own up to what you're actually like doing what you say. And that has been a big part of this experience.
Right. Because the challenge, I like a big challenge. That's maybe assuming that there is that you can overcome it. Like in that challenge, you're already seeing yourself like, okay, I know I can do this, and it's a challenge, but it will work out. And not to say that thinking about kids is a different way, but like, I mean, if you take the same mindset that you tackle a business problem with for kids, it just doesn't translate, because with the business thing, like you're in control of so much of it. And with the parenting thing, even though you are on some of the framework stuff, like you're really not the response. Mm-hmm. They're in control of that, and they can at any moment turn on you. And I guess a business problem could do the same thing, but it doesn't tend to do it in the same, I don't know, I guess from my perspective, in the same way that kids stuff can. So like you're saying with this, do I really like taking on challenges? Because I just took on the biggest challenge and it's not fucking fun sometimes. Right. I think that that's a difference between a challenge that has an actual solution or a challenge that's a challenge throughout the whole thing.
Just hearing you describe that and thinking about like both of our respective challenges is that there's like a difference between being an advocate for patients and being a patient advocate. The issues that I worked on, like they never personally touched me.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I could say like, yeah, I wanted to do it. And it was a big thing.
Right.
This is different because like now I'm actually in it. Like if I was sick and advocating for change in a hospital versus just changing hospitals because I think they should, that's like a totally different mindset, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
A challenge that you can let go of and a challenge that you can't. Like you can come in and not really have it touch your life, but be real passionate about it. And at the end of the day, the skin in the game is maybe your ego and maybe some finances. Mm-hmm. But with the kids, it's like your skin in the game is your literal skin. Yeah. It touches you in every single way. And because of that, you can't, there's no like, I'm just gonna not think about this for 24 hours, unless you take like a little vacation or something. But even then, it never ever stops. So whatever challenges you're having, you can really never get quite a break from them. And I think that that's another different thing because we have so much skin in the game with our kids and with parenting.
Totally. The humbling is understanding that finances and ego aren't what are important.
Yes.
It's definitely easier said than done.
Absolutely. Oh my God, all of it. All the lessons of parenthood are so much easier said than done. If you had to pick a part of this experience, including the humbling, what would you say that your favorite thing about being a stay-at-home parent is? And are you going to say that you don't have to wear pants? Because I feel like that's just the obvious.
Yeah. I haven't worn closed-toed shoes in 2 months, which has been very nice. It's really interesting to see their evolving personalities. The kids really love music. They love singing. They love dancing. So do I, but I just, I listen to a lot of podcasts and talk and stuff like that. Like if I have my headphones on, I'm probably not listening to music. I'm probably listening just to, someone telling me a story. But it's so funny to hear like what the kids want to hear and like, and just how happy they get. And like, especially because the kids take a shower together sometimes and there's a speaker in the shower. And we were listening to Karma Chameleon and through the glass, it's like the mosaic glass, like you can't really see and there's kind of just a blurry image of them. And Eleanor's just in there just dancing. And she's not dancing for Amelia. She's not dancing for me. She's not doing it to get attention. She was just in there dancing with her little shower cap on. And I was just like, oh my God, look at this carefree little person. Like I love that about her. And she makes up parody songs all the time, and she gets embarrassed when I sing and stuff like that. I think that's the funniest thing. Amelia is an insane person. And that is also pretty funny too, because she just, like the things that she thinks are hilarious, it is unbridled hilarity for her. I mean, she just cracks up rolling around. Like, we're listening to some song and it says, it's like a kick in the pants. And oh boy, that was our whole month, was kick in the pants. And she just was cracking up about it. And it's just so funny because she's got this, like, her teeth are all spaced out because they're still coming in. And she's got this big, like, funny grin.
Yeah.
And that's what, I mean, I know it's like, I mean, these are just little things, but I never got to see any of that before. And it makes me sad I missed it.
Yeah, these kind of moments, like I can see, where you miss some of those big moments. If you're the working parent, you see them in the edges of the day, the beginning edge and the ending edge, but all that meat in the middle and all of that fun and silly and those moments that come out that you may not get to see as a stay-at-home parent, like some of that stuff is sort of what keeps us going, in a sense.
Yeah, well, and also the beginning and end of the day are the worst parts for you and then the worst parts for them. So, like, you're not seeing them at peak kid.
Right. Yeah, totally. Oh, man. Jim, is there anything else you wanted to mention or talk about or anything? Because this has been so awesome.
Good.
I thank you so much.
No, of course. I'm really happy that you do this. I listen to the show. And
you do? Another dad.
Yeah. No, I really think that it goes a long way to be able to have real open conversations and not pretend like everybody is Leave It to Beaver all the time. So, no, I appreciate this.
So I have an update for you all about Jim and where he ended up landing. Just like he mentioned here, he took a job leading Capitol Hill and White House advocacy for an organization that focuses on paid family and medical leave, child welfare, foster care reform, kids in cages at the border, and like 10 million other issues that impact infants and toddlers. He also said that his work culture is so progressive, as you'd imagine with a company whose interests are what they are. So congrats on all of that, Jim. This brings up a point that I want to make sure I mention, and I sort of mentioned it in the interview. This stay-at-home parent gig was never going to be a long-term thing for Jim. It was a pit stop rather than an entire era of his life. I know most stay-at-home parents don't have that out, nor maybe even want that out, but I did feel it was important to mention because it does change how you relate to the situation that you're in. If you know it's going to end soon, you can handle some things, whereas if you know you have years of it, that's a little bit different. Also, I mean, having an existential crisis in the minivan within 2 months, that was so satisfying to hear, because we've all been there. And I really appreciated the thought he put into what he would do differently in his next job, having been through the humbling. It made me think about how different our systems and policies and laws would be if the people making them had firsthand experience of being a constant caretaker, like Jim experienced. Imagine all the things that would be different from this perspective. In closing, women need to be in power. Am I right? So a quick word about reviews and ratings. You tapping on the 5 stars in your podcast app or leaving a few kind words about how you're enjoying this podcast helps me and you. When I reach out to a higher profile guest to ask them to be on the show, they or their publicist usually look to see how many ratings and reviews I have to see if it's a popular podcast or not and worth their time. And as you'd imagine, they tend to say yes to the more popular podcasts. So you're taking just a few moments right now to rate or review me helps all of us so that Snoop Dogg will say yes someday. You want Snoop Dogg, don't you? As always, thanks for listening. And Happy New Year! We did it, you guys! Another year we didn't fly off to the Cayman Islands and create an entirely new identity and life for ourselves. Pat on the back to all of us. Except those who abandoned their families and are living in the Cayman Islands. Although technically, I think that could be considered self-care.
Here I